Hey guys, welcome to today's video. It is Unit 2, Topic 2 that we are kicking off today, and it is on infectious disease. So the learning goals for today are, firstly, to identify the difference between infectious diseases and non-infectious diseases. We will look at different things that can cause disease, including prions, viruses, bacteria, fungi, protists, and parasites. These are called pathogens. We'll also describe how do virulence factors affect pathogenesis. And we'll talk about a few things there. As well as, lastly, just practice identifying what's going on when we look at a bit of data. So here you can pause the video and write your own version of those learning goals. Cool, so let's get into it. First up is infectious and non-infectious disease. So we're talking about just identifying what's the difference here. So non-infectious and infectious. A disease is any condition that disturbs basically the normal functioning of the body, as in the body can't maintain homeostasis any longer. So you can see how Unit 1 was separate to Unit 2, but Topic 1 and Topic 2 in Unit 2 relate to each other, homeostasis and infectious disease. An illness is a deterioration in the normal state of health of an organism. So a disease might cause an illness. And a pathogen, so just a couple of key terms here, a pathogen is an agent that actually causes the disease. So that can be something like a parasite or a virus. So we have a pathogen can invade the body. It can cause a condition, that's a disease. But the illness is the deteriorated state of that person's health due to that disease. So let's talk about the two different types of diseases. We have firstly infectious and non-infectious. So infectious and non-infectious diseases are very different. An infectious disease can be transmitted from one person to another, while a non-infectious disease cannot be spread through person-to-person contact. So we'll look at these two now. And another way of saying it is by saying, well, are they communicable, or non-communicable? So infectious diseases are communicable. That means that they can be spread from person to person. Infectious diseases are, in other words, contagious, meaning that a person, even if they don't have an illness, they're not showing symptoms, they can still be a carrier and expose other people to the disease. As we have witnessed with the spread of COVID-19, infectious disease can be easily transferred through direct contact. This includes when someone comes into contact with an infected person, or it can just be through body fluids, or it can be on the surfaces of things that diseases can be transmitted. Non-infectious diseases, however, are non-communicable, meaning they cannot be transferred through exposure to a carrier. Instead, they appear or grow due to factors such as gene mutations, genetic, it can be from malnutrition, that's like lifestyle, but also environmental toxins, so exposure to things. Infectious diseases are caused by the transmission of a pathogen. Pathogens include bacteria, viruses, fungi, and we're going to look at these in a sec. Whereas non-communicable diseases, they're more due to circumstantial factors, lifestyle or choices or things we're exposed to or family. So let's get into what causes infectious diseases. They are pathogens. Now, the learning goal is to identify the following pathogens, including prions, viruses, bacteria, fungi, protists, and parasites. So here's a bit of an infographic, and we'll just work through a few of these. The first thing you will notice is that all these pathogens, they can be split into two main categories. We have cellular, or living, biotic, or we have acellular, which means non-living. And viruses are really interesting. They kind of fit into this space where they can do what living things do. They can reproduce and move, but they can't do it without a host. So if we get into these different types now, let's focus on viruses to start with. Viruses are they're incapable of reproducing without a host cell. And for that reason, we call them non-living. They typically consist of an inner core of genetic material and are surrounded by a protein coat. They can look very different if you've seen an image of COVID-19 under a microscope. But some are more complex viruses, and they contain these different shapes that actually help them to infect other cells. And there's some cool photos in your textbook that show these. Most of the common sicknesses that we pick up day to day are actually viruses. So what causes the common cold is an upper respiratory tract infection that comes from the rhinovirus, but also like the flu, influenza. It affects more so not just our upper respiratory tract, but our whole body. It can come with aches and all that. They tend to be caught more easy, but they don't last generally as long as other types of infections like bacterial. So bacteria are unicellular prokaryotic cells. So they're simple. They can reproduce really, really quickly. They double and double and compete with host cells for space and nutrition. When your body is fighting a bacterial infection, you can feel it. You're just lethargic. Most bacteria are relatively harmless. In fact, we have them covering the outside of our body, our skin, everything. We have them in our insides, our normal gut flora. Bacteria may cause disease by producing toxic compounds, toxins, and they can also cause different things like food poisoning if our food isn't cooked correctly, like salmonella. Then we also have, let's look at fungi. So fungi are disease causing, and they usually attack body surfaces like our skin or different mucous membranes. They can be categorized into unicellular, like yeasts, but also multicellular, like molds. And most fungi are molds. So then examples of different fungal infections can include thrush, but also athlete's foot. So it's this mold infection. Then we also have parasites. So parasite, they are organisms that grow and feed on an organism to the detriment of the host's survival. Parasites can be classed as either ectoparasites, like living on the outer surface of a host. Then we can think of like ticks and fleas, but then we also have endo means inside, endoparasites living within the host, and these are say tapeworms that live within the gut. They can include like microparasites, tiny single-celled ones, or macroparasites, which are quite large. And if you want to look into it, you can jump online and see like how big can parasites, tapeworms get within people. They're pretty horrendous when they come out. Then we also have prions. So if we jump over here, a prion or a prion is an infectious protein that has folded abnormally into a structure capable of causing a disease. They're essentially folded proteins that can cause some serious injury to the host. So mad cow disease is the example used in the textbook, and it affects the brain and it just breaks down the brain until it sends that organism into a coma, which can lead to death. And then, like prokaryotes, we've already spoken about bacteria. They're just single-celled organisms. They can cause such things like leprosy. And these are just a bit of a similar kind, like single-celled organisms. So, two main categories, cellular and acellular. Pathogens cause diseases. Diseases can be seen through the illness of a person. So, the learning goal was to identify the following pathogens: prions, viruses, bacteria, fungi, protists, and parasites. So jump on your textbooks for a bit more information on those. So virulence factors. How does a pathogen, once it has entered the body, how does it begin working? Why are some infections worse or spread more easily than others? Or why do some infections, like you only need such a tiny exposure or dosage of that pathogen to get sick? Well, it's because of its virulence factors that aid in pathogenesis. So different kind of factors to look at are adherence. Maybe you can think already what to adhere to something means. Like invasion factors, capsules, toxins, and life cycle changes. So let's get into it. The first two images I'll show is we just are going to look at for a sec like a diagram of a bacterium, as well as a diagram of a virus, and there's two kind of different categories we can look at. So this is similar to the COVID-19 structure. It's got this round shape with all these like spikes on the outside, with genetic material here on the inside. But this is another type of virus. These ones affect bacteria. Even bacteria get viruses. These ones are nasty the way that they operate. They essentially have these like little legs, and they will latch onto a bacteria and then inject their genetic material until the genetic material just duplicates and copies itself within a bacterium until the bacteria itself is so full that it bursts and explodes. This is within the body, so now there's just so many more viruses in the body that will now go attach to other bacterial cells and do the same thing to them. But let's look at how do these different things actually get started in the first place. So the virulence factors of bacteria and viruses, they can differ drastically due to just the obvious differences in their look, their composition. A bacteria's virulence factors can be based on, for example, their capsule, that's their outer surrounding part. Also their flagella, that's this like whip-like thing, which obviously doesn't apply to a virus. However, a virus's virulence factors can depend on the proteins that it works with, and also what it is attacking, what kind of cell. Like, is it a bacterial cell that it's going to attack or not? So if we just focus on bacterial virulence factors for a sec, we can see that they have this outer-like capsule. And this capsule prevents the immune system, like our white blood cells, our macrophages, and our neutrophils, from detecting the bacteria. They affect the immune system from being able to recognize it. So it's like this covert invasion that the capsule helps with. The capsule's ability to evade the immune system can let the bacteria go undetected unless antibodies are developed to match these spikes on this capsule. So they are called antigens. And that's what vaccines do. They inject us with this tiny little bit so our immune system recognizes those triggers and then they see it. But that's what the capsule hopes to do. It evades the immune system. So movement and attachment are also important considerations. So the flagella on a bacteria, it aids in its movement. It helps us, like this whip actually propels it. The flagellum is a key virulence factor in, say, urinary tract infections. Say if we got exposed to something, that's how it moves up through the urethra. So that's movement, but also attachment is a key virulence factor. Like how well can a bacteria attach itself to something? So that's what these things are also used for. These pili, and pili are these little filaments that just aid in allowing it to grip. The greater the ability that a bacteria has to adhere to tissues, well, that improves the bacteria's effectiveness. So one of the more significant virulence factors of bacteria is also toxins. It can produce endotoxins and exotoxins, and these just disrupt and interrupt important cellular processes that help the bacteria to invade tissues. So they can produce some really deadly toxins, and your textbook again talks about a couple of those. Then we also have lifestyle changes, and they can help a pathogen to invade by different cycles in life that they can go through. So the example is like the pathogen that causes tetanus can actually last just in the soil in the ground for years and years until conditions become more favorable for it to begin developing and begin growing. So that's like this kind of life cycle idea. So that is, we've spoke about adherence, like the ability for a bacteria or a virus to be able to actually cling or stick to its invading tissue. It helps that invasion factors include like its ability to not be recognized by the body's immune system. That's why bacterial infections, they can constantly change and develop. Say if we injected ourselves with an antibiotic and we got over that bacterial infection, but then that bacterial might become non-affected by that antibiotic. So then it develops and our body doesn't recognize it if we get that new infection. Invasion factors, do we recognize what's going on here or not? Capsules, they can help in that. And toxin and life cycle changes. So that is just a bit of a crash course on virulence factors. What I would like you guys to do is actually jump into your textbook and open up to page 231, where there's a few questions here. These questions relate back to that last learning goal, the start of this PowerPoint. So after you have read the textbook, that will probably help you a lot more to be able to answer these questions because they relate specifically to the text. So that, of course, is going to be your homework for this week as well. It is to read chapter 14 of the text and just to continue adding keywords to your glossary. But to finish, I just wanted to show you guys this website that I've got, and it's showing how pandemics have just changed throughout history. As human civilizations arose, these diseases struck them down. So this is from history.com. You can jump online yourself, but I'll just pull out a couple of key ones. So the first one that we've got record of going back to is in 430 BC in Athens. And it was this kind of like fever that just caused a lot of destruction. And we think now that it was typhoid fever back then, thousands of years ago. We have a few other plagues. I'll just skim over a few. 540 AD, the Justinian plague. The 11th century was leprosy, and though it had been around for ages, during the Middle Ages it really took a big hit, and even like in some cultures they still think that's punishment from God that ran in families, and this led to ostracism of victims, even like a couple of thousands of years ago in Jesus' time. And it was a horrible disease. The Black Death. This bacterium called Yersinia pestis that traveled on rats. And it was responsible for the death of 1/3 of the world's population. It was massive. England and France were so incapacitated by the plague that the countries called a truce to their war. The British feudal system collapsed when the plague changed economic circumstances and demographics. It ravaged countries like Greenland, so Vikings lost the strength to wage battle against native populations, and the exploration of North America halted. The Columbian Exchange. We have the Great Plague of London, 1665, and this graph shows the kind of mortality rates that it caused, and it caused let me just have a look. Yeah, so they even slaughtered thousands of animals in an effort to control this, and yeah. So cholera, that's like this waterborne disease. The third plague, this caused 15 million victims. We have Fiji measles, the Russian flu. You've probably heard of the Spanish flu recently as well, and this caused 50 million deaths worldwide. That is twice the population of Australia. This was in the early 1900s. Then we have more recently the Asian flu, then HIV, which causes AIDS. It's this immune deficiency, so people just become so susceptible to the slightest sicknesses, and the slightest sicknesses can actually lead to death because their immune system's wiped out. It was prevalent in gay communities, but it was thought to have come from chimpanzees. And then more recently, again, we have had SARS, and then of course COVID-19 pandemic. So that's just a bit of a nice finish to this whole PowerPoint. But nonetheless, I hope that you guys have found this video very interesting and stimulating for you guys to get into your readings. And we'll talk about this all more in class. But God bless you guys, and I will see you soon. Bye.